Hi friends, so today I thought we'd talk about something curious that I noticed when I was in the Holy Land, and let's call this the topography of the Holy Land and the soul. The topography of the Holy Land and the soul. Topography is like, what does the top of the ground, the surface of the ground look like? Is it low? Is it mountains? Are there rivers? Are there seas? Is there desert? Is there forest? That's topography. Well, it's the same with the soul. We have a certain topography of the soul. We have certain ups and downs and ins and outs to the soul. Some dry patches and some beautiful opportunities for fertile ground and for growth. Well, I see a correlation between the two. How so? Well, you know how the scriptures, both in the Old Testament and New Testament, God uses so much of what is available to the people of the time. If they're an agricultural society, if they have mountains, if they like bread, God uses all of that to convey truth. And so it's like he's using all that as analogs, just analog after analog, as analogies for a deeper truth and a deeper reality. And I think that's the case with Israel. When you even look at its seas and rivers and mountains, they're mentioned all throughout the Old Testament and New Testament in ways to facilitate revelation. Like Moses being up on the mountain and he encounters God and Elijah, or Jesus telling a parable about a farmer. And in that, buried in that, is a deep, unmovable truth, an objective truth, a universal truth that is applicable to any culture of any age and any people on any land. So I truly believe that God not only picked Israel, but he also, remember, he said, I'm going to send you to the promised land. So the formation of the people Israel, they weren't even from Israel in the beginning. Abraham wasn't, the father of the Jewish nation. So he came from another part of the ancient Near East, and the Lord led them there. And then, when they were down in Egypt, the Lord led his people back to the promised land through Moses and through Joshua. So, yeah, God had a land in mind when he said, I'm going to teach truth. I'm going to reveal myself through the prophets and the patriarchs, and ultimately through my son, Jesus Christ. And so the land mattered. And he picked the land specifically for many of these reasons and more. Okay, so that's kind of the preface to all this, right? Let's get into it. Bishop Robert Barron talks about not dumbing down your faith, and that there are serious consequences to when we dumb down our faith. Let's look at the topography of Israel's land for an analog of that, the Dead Sea. So a lot of us know that the Dead Sea is the lowest sea. Actually, it's an inland lake, but the lowest sea in all of the world. And it's below sea level. In fact, it's at the lowest point below sea level than any other water mass in the world. What happens when that happens? Well, when you look at the Dead Sea and you look at it over centuries, and of course we've been looking at it over centuries, right? Not just from New Testament times, but from Old Testament times. We've seen what happens. When water flows into the Dead Sea, because it's at the lowest point, meaning everything else around it, except for what is funneling into it, it's all higher, right? So when the Jordan River, which is the main body of water that feeds the Dead Sea, flows into the Dead Sea, that water has nowhere to go. And so what happens? The sun, because it's in the south, it begins to heat up the water. That water evaporates. This continuous source of fresh water evaporates And all that remains is the mineral deposits that it picks up in its long journey from the north through Israel. And so it becomes more and more concentrated on minerals than upon H2O. And do that long enough, like over centuries, and ultimately you have a big lake of mineral deposits. One of the reasons, by the way, why you can float in the Dead Sea is that it's so thick with minerals and salt that you can physically float in it. But guess what? There is no life in it beyond a few microbiological life forms. There is no life in the sea. I say this as an analog for the topography of our souls. How so? Well, I mean, think about it. As faith is flowing into us, okay, from on high, literally, right? And spiritually, figuratively, as the water of life, as and all that God wants to give us through the conduit of faith flows into us. If it goes nowhere, if it has nowhere to go, then what will end up happening is what faith we have and what little faith we have, because it's not flowing, because it's not living, because it's not active, because it's not dynamic, because it has nowhere to go and we don't send it anywhere, we end up dead inside, full of a bunch of other stuff that flows into us that's a part of faith. By that I mean, remember, faith is given to us by moms and dads and priests and pastors and brothers and sisters and friends and stuff. And so it's not perfect, It's open to error and to distortion and to misunderstandings and so on. And so with what is of God flows into us, when we don't use what is of God, that this great, precious, pure gift of faith, that stuff gets evaporated, and only the imperfections remain. The lies, the errors, the half-truths, the preferences, the opinions, the experiences of others, even when those experiences are not grounded in truth. That's what remains. And we become then this seabed, this lake bed of not living water flowing, alive with all kinds of life within it, and able to bless everything around it. But we're left with just what remains after the world has scorched our faith. And we've allowed it to evaporate our faith because we haven't exercised it. And here's where I'm going with all this. Faith has to be exercised. It has to be flowing. It has to be living. It has to be alive. It has to be coming from somewhere and going from somewhere. It just can't remain with me. And that's what we've done as Christians. So many of us we've done with Christians. We've grown up, for instance, as kids in families and in churches and so on. And we receive in Catholic schools and catechism. Good stuff, by the way. We receive from our mom and our dads and from our teachers and our catechists and from other people who have inspired us and grandmothers and grandfathers for a certain period of time. We've received and received. But because we're told things like, don't share your faith, don't use the truths of your faith to bring truth to a society filled with darkness. Don't open your mouth. Don't speak the truth, right? And don't show your faith in public ways. Faith is a private thing. Faith in politics don't go together. Faith, religion and school don't go together. And on we go of dividing our faith from every aspect of our society, shutting up our mouths and not exercising our faith. living it out. And for instance, our lifestyles and our behaviors and the way we treat one another. No, it's a faith. It's my faith. I value it. I receive it. But guess what happens when we don't share it and live it and give it and exercise? It shrivels up and dies, or staying with this analogy, it evaporates. And the topography of the Holy Land, let's just make it broader, nature itself shows us this. We got to start speaking up. We got to start living up to our faith. We have to start evangelizing others and telling people the good news, the good and the beautiful and the true of our faith. We have to start sharing our faith and living it out and giving examples of our faith, leading others by our example, and doing it in a brave and a courageous way, in a bold and abundant way. And when we do that, the faith that we receive is flowing and active and dynamic inside of us. And so it's growing. And it's producing life too. And then it's flowing out of us. But when we're so timid and we're so coward by a culture that says shut up and don't do anything with your faith, then yeah, it makes sense that our faith, we don't value it. We don't cherish it. We don't protect it. We don't try to multiply it. We're not trying to grow it. And when it's not growing inside of us, swirling around inside of us like the undercurrents of a great ocean, it's not keeping things alive. And so it makes sense that the elements outside of our life, in this case, with this analogy, the sun, comes and takes away what little faith we do have. And isn't that happening over and over and over again when you follow the life of a person, or the life of persons in society, the spiritual life, and even their chronological life? In the beginning, they're given all this faith. But then by the time they're 13 or 20 or 25, all that's been evaporated. Well, why do you think it's been evaporated on such a large scale? Well, look at the Dead Sea, and there's your answer. But there's your answer. Because right above the Dead Sea is another sea, the Sea of Galilee. And while distance-wise, they're not too far away from one another, they are worlds away from one another. The same rivers, the same river that feeds the Dead Sea, the Jordan River, is the same river that feeds the Sea of Galilee, or the Lake of Galilee, just north of it. So water, follow this. Water flows into the Lake Galilee. And then water is constantly moving around in Lake Galilee because water flows out of the lake. There are lower points, lower down. So gravity takes it to other places. And look at the Sea of Galilee and all around it, what flows into it and out of it. Everything is green. Everything is full of life. Everything that the Sea of Galilee touches is full of life. The river that comes into it, all the trees and the grasses and the birds of the air and the fish in there, everything that's in the sea and everything that comes out, the river that comes out, again, grasses and plants and flowers and fruits and all of that. But that's the topography, that's what the topography of our soul is supposed to look like. We receive revelation. We receive God. We receive Him in His Word and in worship. We receive Him in His truth. We receive Him in a relationship with Him. And He fills us with life. Every aspect of our life, all the banks of our life, all the shorelines of our life, teeming with life. because the Lord of life is inside of us. And then, because we have this life inside of us, we value it, we cherish it. It brings us joy, it brings us happiness, it brings us clarity, it brings us love, real love. It brings us all these good things, good fruits of the relationship with Jesus Christ and all of his promises. And of course, then when we're filled up with God, we want to share God. And so we do. And the river flows outside of us. And then everything that we touch, we bring to life. Our children or our parents, our brothers and sisters, our spouses that we meet, the children that we raise up, our friendships, people that we play sports with, people that we are neighbors with, people that we go to a ball game with, people that we do X, Y, and Z and A, B, C and with. When we let faith flow out, when we speak, when we act, when we witness, when we testify, when we live an example, and we do it with conviction and love and clarity, and when it gives us a sense of our identity and our mission in this world, then we bless everything around us. And here's the thing about gravity. In the Sea of Galilee to the north, the sea is above the land that's below it. In faith, as long as we keep it elevated, the highest priority, the thing that we treasure the most, then nothing will get above it and overtake it. In fact, everything will flow from it. So another way of saying this is when we don't dumb down our faith, when we live it, the deep intellectual tradition of it, the deep emotional tradition, the deep spiritual tradition, the deep social justice position, the deep tradition that is our faith in every aspect of human living. When we don't dumb it down because truth is inconvenient, for instance, when we hold on to the truth, then it'll flow over and bless everything that it touches. But look at the sea below that, the Dead Sea. When we dumb it down so much that it has become lower than everything else in life that we value, then all of the crap around us flows into us rather than faith flowing out into them. But when we dumb down our faith has nowhere to go and it will bless no one. Till next time, friends.